Sarah stood there beside her husband's grave, her cold hands gripping the granite as if she were trying to hold on to a fragment of a memory that had already slipped away. In front of her lay the silent patch of earth where the man she had loved for 30 years was buried. The fading light of dusk grew dimmer, the wind brushing through her hair, carrying with it a deep sense of loneliness and helplessness. She had not been able to stop crying when she stood here on that day, but today was different. Not because the grief had returned in waves, but because a sudden truth had crashed into her, shattering everything in a single moment. She had once believed she understood everything about Thomas. He had been her husband, her friend, her companion for 3 decades. She had seen him through the hardest days, through the long nights when it was just the two of them sharing the silence, through peaceful moments that felt untouchable, as if nothing could ever disturb their lives. But today, standing by his grave, she began to doubt it all. That day, Sarah had gone to the supermarket as part of her usual weekly routine. She no longer expected cheerful conversations or warm evenings with him. Only silence remained. But as she stood among rows of canned goods, choosing what she needed for dinner, a familiar sound suddenly echoed. A soft cough lingered in the air, followed by a quiet complaint about the prices, just like the one she used to hear when Thomas was still alive. That voice, it could not belong to anyone else but him. Sarah turned around, her heart seeming to stop. A man stood there, his gaze drifting over the labels. He had graying hair, an uneven smile, and a small scar on his forehead. Every detail about him made Sarah feel dizzy. It was impossible. This man looked exactly like Thomas. The way he stood, the way he looked, everything was identical to the husband she had buried 6 months ago. Sarah stepped closer, her hands trembling, her eyes unable to believe what was unfolding before her. "Thomas," she called out, her voice hoarse with emotion. The man turned to her looking surprised, his eyes showing no recognition. He gave a gentle smile and said, "I'm sorry, I think you've mistaken me for someone else." Sarah froze. She could not understand. This was Thomas's voice, but it was not him. She tried to steady her thoughts. "Thomas, it's me, Sarah," she said, her breath heavy. "Don't you recognize me?" She waited, her heart tightening in her chest. He looked at her, confusion in his expression, then said softly, "My name is Daniel Brooks. I don't know you." Sarah's entire world collapsed in that instant. She could not believe what she had just heard. She could not understand why Thomas would say such a thing. How could it be possible? The years they had spent together, every moment they had shared, suddenly felt like a cruel illusion. It was not him. It could not be. But then what was the truth? She could not ignore it, could not stop now. The man standing before her, the man she believed she had lost forever, was now living in the body of someone else. Sarah felt her legs weaken, but she refused to appear fragile in front of him. She pulled herself together, trying to remain calm, then took out her phone and searched for an old photo. She held it up and showed it to him, unable to say anything more. "Look, this is you," she said, her voice barely steady. He glanced at the photo, and for a brief moment his eyes seemed to blur with uncertainty. He shook his head slightly. "I'm sorry, I've never seen this picture before. Are you sure you're not mistaken?" A chilling sensation spread through Sarah's entire body. She felt something inside her breaking with every word, with every heartbeat. She could not bear it. Every smallest detail of Thomas, the intimate moments, the times he laughed in the kitchen, now existed only in her memory. All of it was being denied by the very person she had once loved the most. Nothing remained except emptiness. Sarah could not stand there any longer. She turned and walked away, ignoring the stares from those around her. She no longer cared how others saw her. Everything was falling apart. If that was not Thomas standing there, then who was it? And if it was not him, then who was the man she had buried in that grave? The questions had no answers, but Sarah knew she had to uncover the truth. Nothing could stop her now. She would not give up, because this truth, no matter how painful, was the only thing that could ever bring her peace. Sarah could not leave the supermarket at that moment, even though her body felt exhausted, her legs seeming glued to the floor. She stood there in that cold, sterile space, beneath flickering lights and surrounded by unfamiliar laughter and voices, feeling as if everything had turned into a performance she could not escape. That man, Daniel, had not only shocked her, but had also taken away everything she once believed to be true. She leaned against the shopping cart, her hands trembling, her mind tangled with countless questions. Where is Thomas? The question kept circling in her head. How could he look exactly like Thomas, even down to the smallest details? It felt as if she were facing a shadow of the past, something she could see but never touch. That man, even though he carried her husband's face, did not know who she was. He did not even recognize her after all those years they had spent together. Sarah forced herself to walk out of the supermarket. She could not stay there any longer, could not let the confusion take control. She hurried outside, where the cold afternoon air hit her face, yet it did nothing to calm the storm inside her. She opened the car door and sat down, starting to drive without knowing where she was going. Even so, she found herself unable to stop, following the man as if she were a nameless shadow with no reason of her own. She followed him into the parking lot, a sense of unease and fear rising within her. The man, or rather, the man she believed to be Thomas, got into an old white sedan with a dent on the rear door. This was not the car Thomas loved. She did not need to look any further. She knew Thomas's car, the one he carefully took care of every weekend, polishing every small detail. This car was not his. This car belonged to someone else. Sarah felt the air around her grow heavy, as if the space itself were closing in on her. She continued following him until they reached a strange house. It was a small, pale blue house in a quiet neighborhood, shaded by tall trees. The door opened, and a woman who looked a few years younger than Sarah stepped out. She smiled when she saw the man, a warm, effortless smile, as if this were simply part of her everyday life. She embraced him, and a chilling sensation ran down Sarah's spine, a feeling she could not erase no matter how hard she tried to ignore it. But that was not all. As the woman reached out to take the bags, two children suddenly ran out from inside the house. A boy, about 8 years old, and a girl around 10, rushed toward the man with their arms wide open, calling out to him with joyful voices. "Grandpa, did you buy ice cream?" the little girl asked, while the boy kept jumping excitedly. The man pulled them into his arms, his laughter warm yet unfamiliar, impossible to deny. It was a laugh Sarah had heard a million times in her own kitchen, the same laugh she believed she had lost forever. She sat there in silence inside her car, like a ghost watching everything unfold without being able to step forward. The images struck her one after another, painful yet undeniable. This man, whoever he was living a life she could not comprehend. He was not just a stranger. He was someone who had replaced Thomas, someone who had taken everything from her. Unable to remain still any longer, Sarah started the car, feeling as if her heart were about to explode. She turned the wheel and drove out of the neighborhood, not knowing what she was doing, only knowing that she could not leave without answers. She kept driving, pain, fear, and confusion flooding every corner of her mind. She stopped at an intersection, her phone in her hand, overwhelmed by a feeling she could not explain. What had she done wrong? Why was all of this happening to her? A familiar voice from the phone cut through her thoughts. "Mom, I understand how you feel, but did you really see clearly, Lucas?" her son said. She did not need to look at the screen to know he was worried about her, but perhaps he did not fully understand. Did not understand that everything she thought she knew about his father had now shattered into pieces. "You don't understand, Lucas. You can't understand," Sarah snapped, her voice choked with emotion. She no longer wanted to hide it. She no longer wanted to live in that blur of uncertainty. She needed the truth. Lucas fell silent, not responding immediately, but she knew he had heard the desperation in her voice, impossible to conceal. She kept driving with no destination in mind. She only knew that this truth had to be uncovered, no matter the cost. Sarah could not escape that image. The image of the man she had loved now standing in the arms of another woman, with children who were not hers. The sound of laughter, the voices calling him grandpa, cut into her heart like a blade. She could not believe what was happening, yet she could not pull herself away. Her mind spun, her body felt trapped in a nightmare with no way out. She pressed down on the gas and sped through the streets, tears streaming endlessly down her face. She did not know where she was going, did not know what she should do. Everything blurred, leaving only pain and fear behind. For a moment, she thought she could turn back, knock on that man's door, and demand answers from him. But she did not. She did not want to face the truth that way. Sarah wanted to find the answer to this story in her own way. She stopped in front of a small cafe, a place where she and Thomas used to sit together on quiet afternoons, talking about the simple things in life. But today, nothing was the same. She took out her phone, her hands trembling as she opened an old photo of Thomas. In the picture, the two of them were smiling on a beach, sunlight resting on their faces, and she could feel the happiness in every detail of his expression. How could someone else replace him? How could he disappear like that without leaving a trace, except for lies and silence? Sarah called Lucas, her voice on the phone sounding as if a fire were burning inside her chest. "I can't believe what's happening. Do you see this? That man, he looks exactly like Thomas. How is that even possible, Lucas?" Lucas remained silent, perhaps not knowing what to say or not daring to accept the truth. Sarah heard a sigh from the other end. "Mom, I know you're hurting, but you have to trust me. Don't take this any further. I think this is just in your head." Sarah tightened her grip on the phone, her eyes lifting to the window as light rain began to fall. She knew Lucas wanted to protect her, but he did not understand the pain she was going through. He could not fully grasp the despair she felt. "You don't understand, Lucas," Sarah said, her voice turning sharp. "If you saw what I saw, you wouldn't say that. I can't live in the shadow of a man who is dead while the truth is right in front of me." She hung up and sat there in the cafe, lost in thought, her heart heavy. Everything seemed to be falling apart. She had spent her entire life with a man who now was nothing in his own eyes. But she could not give up. She could not let Thomas, whether in the past or the present, continue to control her life like this. She decided not to sit there any longer. Sarah stood up and walked outside, determination filling her heart. She could not let this doubt linger in her mind any longer. She had to uncover the truth, no matter how long it took, no matter what she might have to face. Sarah returned to the small neighborhood where the man lived. Everything there felt unfamiliar to her. It was not Thomas's home, not the life she had once shared with him. Every street, every narrow path felt like a reminder of a loss she could never undo. She stood at a distance, trying not to be noticed, watching the man walk into the small blue house with his family. He, the man who had lived beside her for so many years, had now become someone entirely different. Sarah did not know what she was doing. She only knew that she had to do something to answer these silent questions. She could not walk away and accept that everything was just a nightmare. She drove away from the neighborhood, her heart heavy. The rain fell steadily, and Sarah could only stare out through the window, her mind filled with confusion. Never had she felt so alone. But in that very moment, she realized she could not let this deception control her life. She had to find the truth, no matter how terrible it might be. She decided she would not give up. Never. Sarah could not remember how long she had been driving. It felt as if she were drifting in an endless wave with no place to stop. There was only the soft sound of rain tapping against the car window, the wind whistling through the narrow gaps, and her heart, heavy and exhausted. She had once believed that the truth would bring peace, but now the truth felt like a fire burning everything down, leaving behind nothing but ashes she could not erase. She decided not to go home. She could not, even though that house was where she and Thomas had built so many memories together. Now it was nothing more than an empty shell, a place without the presence of the husband she had once trusted completely. She drove through the streets without direction, hoping her heart might find some trace of peace in this life. But there was none. Every house, every street felt like an open wound she could not look at without pain. She stopped in front of an empty park, where tall trees cast long shadows across the damp ground. Sarah opened the car door with no clear purpose, only a feeling that she needed to do something to push away the suffocating weight inside her. She walked into the park, her steps unsteady, as if trying to run away from herself. Raindrops clung to her face, but she did not care. The cold did not wake her. It only made her feel as though she had fallen into a bottomless abyss. Sarah sat down on a stone bench in the park, quietly watching the leaves fall. A cold wind swept through again, carrying dry leaves that rustled before dropping to the ground. That feeling of letting go brought back everything that had happened over the past few days. She had seen Thomas again, or more precisely, a man who looked exactly like him. That man had denied her, had said he did not know her, and then had walked away as if she had never existed in his world. She knew she could not stop here. She could not sit and cry over a past that was already gone. She had to do something to change this situation. But what could she do? She could not go back and face the people who had once supported her, because even the person closest to her, Lucas, had admitted he knew nothing until it was already too late. She felt abandoned in the darkness. In that moment, Sarah wondered if she had the strength to keep searching for the truth, whether what she would face next would be worth going all the way. But she had already decided that she could not turn back. If she had to sacrifice everything just to know the truth, she would do it. She had loved Thomas, had built a life with him, and now the only thing left for her was to search for the remaining pieces. Sarah returned to her car and drove toward Daniel's house. When she arrived, she realized that this time she would not hide anymore. She would not remain in the shadows. She would face everything directly. She parked at a distance so she would not be noticed, then stepped out of the car. Night had fallen, the silence spreading like a dark curtain, nothing standing in her way. She moved closer to the small house where the man who had deceived her lived. She knew this would be the last time she stood here, the last time she would face her past. She stood outside the window, looking inside. A warm yellow light glowed from within, casting long shadows across the pavement. The woman, Claudia, was sitting in the living room, laughing and talking with the children. Daniel, the man she once called Thomas, sat nearby, watching them with gentle eyes. Everything in that room, the warmth, the intimacy, was once hers. Now it had all become a cruel illusion. She let out a quiet breath, her heart filled with determination. If it was not Daniel, if it was not that man, then who was the Thomas she had loved? How could she accept that all the memories, the promises, the days they had shared had been thrown away like nothing? She stood there in the darkness, her eyes fixed on the window, unable to do anything but observe and analyze every gesture, every glance. She felt like a stranger in her own home. Sarah took out her phone, her hands trembling as she looked again at the photo of her and Thomas on their wedding day. They were smiling, holding hands, looking at each other with hope for a future. Nothing could break. But now, it was all in the past. None of it was real anymore. Everything had been replaced by deception. She turned and walked away, without regret, without looking back. She knew there was nothing that could bring her back to the old path, the path of illusions she had once believed in. She had to move forward, no matter how difficult the next step might be. She would not let those who had deceived her take the rest of her life. She would find the truth, and she would fight for it until the very end. Sarah felt each step grow heavier as she returned to her car, sinking into the driver's seat with a mind tangled in confusion. Even though she could no longer see that man, the one she believed to be Thomas, his image was burned into her thoughts. She had seen him in that house, in moments of happiness, beside another woman and children who were not hers. Each image cut into her heart like a blade, making everything else fade into meaninglessness. But one thought refused to leave her mind. If he was not Thomas, then who was he? And what had truly happened over the past 6 months? She lifted her hand to her eyes, trying to wipe away the exhaustion and pain. She could not just sit there, could not let herself drown in this storm of emotions. She had to do something. The truth had to be uncovered, and she was the only one who could do it. Sarah stopped in front of a small cafe near the neighborhood. The dim yellow lights glowing in the night created a sense of loneliness, yet also felt like a guiding light. She stepped inside, where only a few customers sat quietly, lost in their own thoughts. She took a seat in a small corner, ordered a black coffee, then pulled out her phone. The screen lit up, not to check messages or call anyone, but to reopen the photos of Thomas, the ones she had kept for so many years. Every memory she once believed would stay with her forever. She gently ran her fingers over each photo, looking at the sweet moments that now to her all felt like lies. The pictures of laughter by the beach, The holidays with family, the peaceful evenings in their home, all of it had suddenly become like an old film with no meaning left. But there was something that had not changed. The smallest details, the scar on Thomas's forehead, his fingers, the way he looked at her whenever he said he loved her. Those things still lived in her mind as something inseparable. If that was not Thomas, then who was that man? And if it was not him, then who was the man she had buried 6 months ago? She could not keep living with these questions. She needed answers, and she would find them. Sarah stood up, determination filling her eyes. She knew that if not now, then never. If not her, then who would do it? She would not allow herself to be deceived again. She returned to her car and drove toward Lucas's house, her son. She could not continue searching for the truth without his help. She knew Lucas had known part of the truth, but not everything, and that made her feel betrayed. She could not keep hiding, could not continue living in a world built on lies. When she arrived at Lucas's house, the door was already open, and her son stood there, his eyes red, clearly having been awake all night. "Mom, why did you come to see me?" Lucas asked, but his voice no longer carried its usual calm. He knew this would be a difficult day. Sarah did not answer immediately. She stepped inside, sat down on the chair in the living room where they had sat together hundreds of times before. She looked into Lucas's eyes, then took a deep breath, preparing for what she was about to say. "You already knew, didn't you?" she said, not as a question. She had known the answer for a long time. She only needed confirmation. Lucas sat down across from her, his hands trembling slightly as he held the cup of coffee Sarah had just placed on the table. "Mom, I did not want to hurt you," Lucas said, his voice hesitant, "but maybe you deserve to know." Sarah could not stop looking into her son's eyes. She was too exhausted to ask anything more. Everything had been clear for a long time, and now the only thing left was to face it. "Thomas did not die in that accident," she whispered, as if saying it out loud was a form of release. "Do you know what he did? He built another life, lived with another woman, had children with her, while I was still living in pain and deception." Lucas looked down, unable to meet her gaze. "Mom, I cannot tell you everything. I cannot let you know it all because you would not be able to bear it. But if you truly want to know, then I will tell you everything." Sarah felt the pain inside her shatter. Everything she believed about her son seemed to collapse as well. All that Lucas had done to hide the truth, something she could not accept, was now exposed. But she could not stop. She had come too far and there was no turning back. "Lucas, you cannot keep me in the dark any longer. I need to know," she said, her voice firm, even as a storm of emotions surged within her. "I will not give up." She stood up and walked out without turning back. She had found the truth, and no matter how painful it was, she would not retreat. She could not allow this deception to continue controlling her life. She would fight for the truth, no matter what she had to face. She would find the final answer, no matter how painful it might be. Sarah felt the cold from her hands spreading into her mind, each finger numb as she gripped the steering wheel tightly, her eyes fixed on the road ahead without blinking. She did not know how many streets she had driven through, only that she could not stop. Everything now felt blurred, no longer clear as before. She needed to find the truth, and she would do whatever it took to get it. When she returned to the house of the man she had seen at the supermarket, or more precisely, the shadow of Thomas, the unease came rushing back. She could not forget the look on that woman's face when she had stepped into the house, nor could she forget the laughter of the children calling that man Grandpa. She suddenly felt as if she were standing in the middle of a spiral of deception, unable to escape. The feeling of betrayal, of being left alone in a world she could not understand, made it hard for her to breathe. She stood in the parking area, staring at the small, pale blue house ahead. It was so close to everything she had once known. A house that seemed ordinary, yet now held a pain she had never imagined. She looked up at the window, sensing the warmth from inside, the yellow lights glowing from the living room where that family gathered. But she could not allow herself to keep standing there, could not just watch and imagine everything. Sarah pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling, as she opened a photo of Thomas that she always kept with her. In the picture, they were smiling together on a beach, just like the days of happiness before everything turned into a lie. That photo was no longer a sweet memory. It had become proof of a deception she could not escape. She had to do something to end this nightmare. She could not live with these questions forever. She had loved Thomas. She had built an entire life with him. Now all that remained were lies and silence. She threw the phone onto the seat, refusing to let weakness and confusion take over. She had spent too long living in doubt and uncertainty. This was not the moment to step back. She had come too far, and there was no turning back. No matter what, she had to find the truth. Sarah decided to go inside. She parked the car, took a deep breath, and stepped out, pulling her coat tighter against the cold wind. Her steps were steady, driven by an unshakable determination. She stopped in front of the man's house, Daniel's house. This time, she no longer felt the fear she had felt when facing him before. She was ready. She stood at the door, sensing the quiet atmosphere, so different from the lively noise she had once witnessed inside. Perhaps because this time, she was not standing outside observing, but stepping in. Standing there, she felt something strange, as if she were facing a door that led into a past she had never wanted to open. The seconds stretched endlessly. She knocked lightly on the door. No sound came from inside. No one opened it immediately. Sarah knew that no one could avoid the truth forever. Finally, the door opened, and the woman she had seen before, Claudia, stood in front of her. She looked at Sarah cautiously, as if sensing something was wrong. Sarah did not care about her expression. At this moment, the only thing that mattered was the truth. "Hello," Sarah said, her voice calm yet firm. "I am Thomas's wife." Claudia stared at her as if she could not believe what she had just heard. She stepped back slightly, her eyes wide, her lips moving without forming words. Sarah did not give her time to react. She walked inside, looking around the house with a cold gaze, like a stranger entering her own home. Claudia hesitated, then stepped back and gestured toward the man. "Daniel, what is going on?" Sarah saw Daniel walk out from the kitchen, his expression changing the moment he recognized her. His eyes no longer held surprise or the casual ease from the first time they met. Now there was fear, as if he knew something had gone beyond control. He could not deny it, could not continue living in a lie. "Why are you here?" Daniel said, his voice rough. Sarah did not answer right away. She stepped closer, standing tall, her eyes locked onto his face. "I buried you, Thomas. You cannot pretend any longer." Daniel stepped back, glancing at Claudia, his eyes filled with regret, yet he still did not dare to admit anything. Claudia stood behind him, confused and shaken, unable to understand what was happening. But Sarah did not care. She knew she had lived too long in a world built on lies. "You cannot keep living another life, Thomas," Sarah said, each word sharp and cutting. "I did not see the truth all this time, but now I know everything." At that moment, Daniel could no longer stay calm. He looked down, his hands clenched tightly, yet he said nothing. Claudia, shocked, stepped closer to him. "Daniel, is this true?" Sarah did not respond to Claudia. She kept her eyes on Daniel. No regret left within her. "I will not let myself be deceived again." Sarah stood there in the living room of a house that no longer belonged to her in any way. Every step she took inside felt like an intrusion into a space she had once believed would be hers forever. Thomas, or rather Daniel, stood there like a ghost of the past, impossible to deny, yet unable to escape the truth. She looked at him, and it felt as if her heart had died long ago, leaving behind only fragments of a life that had been torn apart. She could not continue living in this lie. She was too exhausted, had endured too much to accept any of it anymore. "Daniel," she called his name, her voice no longer trembling like in the early days when she had still been uncertain, afraid to believe what she felt. "You cannot keep lying to me." Daniel turned to look at her, his eyes filled with confusion. Yet there was also a trace of arrogance, the arrogance of a man who knew he had deceived others for far too long. He did not answer immediately. A heavy silence filled the space between them. Claudia, the woman standing beside him, still did not fully understand what was happening, but she clearly sensed that something was wrong. "You have nothing to say," Sarah continued, each word cutting through everything that had been hidden for so long. "You built another life. You lied to me. You lied to this family. And now what? Do you think you can keep deceiving me forever?" Daniel could no longer maintain his composure. He lowered his head, unable to meet her eyes. "Sarah, you don't understand," he whispered, his voice soft like a delayed apology. "Everything I did because I could not keep living like that. I did not want to lose everything." She let out a bitter laugh, the pain inside her spreading through her entire body. "You did not want to lose everything," she repeated, but this time there was no trace of sympathy left for him. "You have already lost everything. You are no longer Thomas. You are no longer the man I loved. You have lost yourself, Daniel." The tension hung in the air like a string pulled too tight. Claudia, standing beside him, was finally beginning to grasp part of the truth. She turned to Daniel, her eyes filled with confusion, and said quietly, "Daniel, is what she is saying true? Have you really been living two lives?" Daniel did not respond right away. The silence stretched on as if time itself had stopped, the air in the room heavy and suffocating. Sarah no longer had the strength to endure it all, but she knew she could not stop now. She had pushed herself to the limit, and there was no turning back. "You deserve to know the truth, Sarah," Daniel finally said, his voice unsteady, as if he were being forced to admit something he had spent his entire life hiding. "I cannot keep living with you like this anymore. Everything we built, it was all a lie. I cannot keep deceiving you." Sarah said nothing. She simply stood there, staring at the man she once loved, now a stranger in her life. He was not Thomas, not the man she had once trusted completely. All the promises, all the plans for a future together, now existed only as fading memories. Claudia stood between them, her hands trembling, unsure of what to do next. She looked at Sarah, then at Daniel, as if searching for a truth she could not understand. But what she did not realize was that Sarah no longer needed anyone's sympathy. She only needed the truth, and that truth, no matter how painful, was the only thing she had left. "Do you think I can forgive you?" Sarah finally spoke, her voice sharp like a blade. "I am no longer the woman you once knew. You have hurt me too much, and now you still think I will forgive you." Daniel remained silent, his eyes sinking into regret. She looked at him, but saw no true remorse, only emptiness, something she could not fully comprehend. "I will not forgive you, Daniel," she said coldly, "because you do not deserve it." No one spoke again. Claudia quietly stepped back, unable to face what was unfolding. Sarah realized clearly that she had nothing left to lose. She no longer had the husband she loved, no longer had the family she had built. All she had now was a new life she would have to begin from nothing. Sarah turned away, no longer looking at the people behind her. She was too tired of running from the truth. This truth had changed everything. She no longer needed to live in that darkness. She walked out of the house, leaving behind everything that had once belonged to her. She did not know what the future would bring, but she knew one thing for certain: she would not let this past define her life. She stepped outside, took a deep breath, and for the first time in many months, Sarah felt a sense of true freedom. Sarah did not know how many streets she had driven through. She only knew that her heart felt unbearably heavy, and everything around her seemed to be falling apart. Every moment of her life now felt like a chain of nightmares she could not wake from. Even though she had seen the truth, even though Daniel had admitted everything, she still felt as if she were living in a world where everything she once believed in was a lie. She could not face it all at once, but she could not keep running from it forever. She did not return to Lucas's house. No, today was not the time to ask him anything more. She felt that she needed to step away from everything, not only to find the truth, but also to save herself. She turned the steering wheel and drove without any clear destination. The rain kept falling, steady and heavy, like the emotions she could not explain inside her. The drops sliding across the windshield felt like unanswered questions. Eventually, she stopped in front of an empty park, a place where she could sit alone and think about everything that had happened. Outside, the streetlights reflected on the wet ground, creating blurred streaks of light. She stepped out of the car, feeling the cold air creep in, yet nothing could make her feel colder than what was inside her. She needed to think, needed to understand what she would do next. Sarah's heart was restless, spinning in a storm of pain and unease. Daniel's words echoed in her mind, every sentence, every word cutting deep into her heart. "I cannot keep living with you like this anymore," he had said, as if everything she had given meant nothing. All those years of love, all those sweet memories, now reduced to lies. She felt betrayed, not only by Thomas or Daniel, but also by herself. She had believed she understood everything about that man, about their life, but now it was all nothing but uncertainty, a game she had never controlled. Sarah wandered through the park with no purpose, only to feel the quiet, to let her soul settle for a moment. The darkness of the night and the emptiness around her seemed to wrap around her, yet they could not erase the painful images in her mind. She thought about Claudia, the woman Daniel had chosen instead of her. She thought about the children who called him Grandpa, those images replaying so vividly as if they were taking over her entire mind. Never had Sarah felt so weak. She had always been a strong woman, someone who had fought through countless hardships. Yet now it felt as if all that strength had disappeared. She had loved Thomas with all her heart, and now that heart had shattered because of what he had done. She looked at the bare trees, at the falling leaves, like forgotten memories, and wondered if any of it still meant anything at all. She took out her phone and opened a message from Lucas that she had not read. He told her to come home, told her not to go too far, but she could not. She could not go back. She could not continue living in the shadow of a man who was supposed to be dead. She had to stand on her own. She had to understand everything that had happened, every truth that had been hidden from her. She returned to her car and drove to a quiet area in the city. From inside the car, she looked out at the empty houses, at rooms that had become cold and hollow. She did not want to go back to that house, the house filled with memories she could not hold on to, with lies she had lived with for so many years. She could not face it now. She could not face the past when even the present no longer felt real. Sarah stopped in front of a small cafe, a place she used to go whenever she wanted to escape from everything. She walked inside alone, with no one beside her. The dim lights inside made her feel small, yet somehow comforted. She chose a quiet corner, slowly sipping her coffee, hoping to calm the chaos inside her, even if just a little. But the silence did not last. Her thoughts returned to Daniel and Claudia, to the children she had never known yet, who now felt like part of this story. She had found some pieces, but the picture was still incomplete. She needed to know more. She could not live with endless questions, could not remain trapped in uncertainty. She decided she would not wait any longer. She would not let the past continue to haunt her. She stood up, placed the coffee cup on the table, and walked outside, determination in her eyes. Everything had to end, no matter how. She would not let these lies control her life for another day. She did not need all the answers right away, but one thing was clear. She would not return to the path that had led her here. She would create a new path, no matter how difficult it might be. She would find the truth and live honestly with herself. Sarah drove through familiar streets, but the feeling inside her was no longer the same as before. The city she once called home now felt like a closed door, filled with secrets that could never be undone. She no longer felt at peace. Every corner of the city, once tied to memories of Thomas, now only made her feel suffocated. Every turn, every road she passed seemed to remind her of a truth she could not deny. Thomas, or Daniel, was no longer the man she had loved. He had changed, and that change, no matter how painful, was still the truth. She did not return to Lucas's house. She did not want to face her son at this moment. The sense of betrayal from those closest to her made her feel like a stranger in her own home. Lucas could not fully understand what she was going through, and perhaps he never could. She needed to face this truth alone. Sarah drove back to Thomas's house. No, not Thomas's house anymore. It was the house of the man who had deceived her, of Daniel, the man she had believed to be Thomas all those years. She stood in front of the door, feeling the cold silence surrounding it. This house, once the place she thought was the most peaceful, now made her feel like she had stepped into somewhere unfamiliar. She did not want to go inside, but she could not stand outside forever. She had to face the truth, and this truth had to be seen with her own eyes. When Sarah pushed the door open and stepped inside, the air remained the same, quiet and empty. But inside her, everything had changed. The house was no longer the place where she and Thomas had shared beautiful memories. Everything now was covered in a layer of betrayal. She walked into the living room, looking around as memories of past happiness returned. The photos on the wall, the simple decorations, all of them once felt connected to her. But now, they had all been replaced by deception. She walked to the table where Thomas used to sit every morning, holding the coffee cup he liked, and wondered if she could ever return to those days. Could she go back to that life, where she once felt like the happiest person in the world? The answer was no. She had already lost everything. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, making Sarah flinch. She was not expecting anyone, but when she looked through the window, she recognized a familiar car parked outside. It was Claudia, the woman Sarah had met in this house, the woman she knew had a connection with Daniel or Thomas, even though she no longer knew who he truly was. Claudia walked in and saw Sarah standing in the middle of the living room. She stopped, unsure of what to say. Her eyes were filled with surprise, as if she could not understand why Sarah was here. But Sarah had no time for explanations. She did not come here to hear excuses. She came to find the truth, and she knew that no matter how painful it would be, she would not stop until everything was revealed. Claudia, Sarah began, her voice steady, strong, and unwavering. You know who I am, and you know I have been living in a lie all these years. But I cannot keep living like this. I need the truth. Do you know everything? Do you know who Daniel really is? Claudia stepped back, as if shocked by the question. She looked at Sarah for a moment, then slowly sat down on a nearby chair. They both fell silent, and in that silence, Sarah could feel the tension between them. Claudia was not her enemy, but she was the only person who could help her understand the man she had once loved. Sarah, I do not know what to say. Claudia paused, then looked straight into Sarah's eyes. Daniel has been living another life. I do not know what happened, but I know he has changed. And I could not save him. Those words hit like a shock, but Sarah did not allow herself to break. She needed to stay strong, needed to understand what was happening. Then what do you know about him? Sarah asked again, no longer patient. Do you know why he had to fake his death, why he did this? Claudia looked down, unable to meet Sarah's gaze. She let out a quiet breath, her voice lowering. He had another family. I do not know why he did it, but I know he could not leave her and live with me completely. He deceived both of us. Sarah felt as if she were being pulled into a spiral with no escape. Those words, no matter how painful, at least gave her part of the answer. She could not endure it any longer. So he deceived me and you and even himself. And I buried a man who was not the one I loved. He was already dead in my eyes, but it turned out to be nothing more than a game played on everyone. Claudia looked at her, her eyes filled with regret. I am sorry, Sarah. I do not know what to say to ease your pain. Sarah did not respond. She turned and walked out without looking back. She had found the truth, no matter how painful it was. And now she would not let this past continue to imprison her life. She got into her car, started the engine, and drove away, ending everything. Her life could not continue like this, and Sarah knew that now she had the right to choose again, to start over. Sarah could no longer remember how many streets she had driven through. Every road, every house, felt like it was mocking her, reminding her of everything she had lost. The memories of Thomas, of the years she had devoted entirely to him, now hung over her like dark clouds, blocking out the clear sky she once believed in. She had given everything to a man, to a life that she now realized had been nothing but a lie, a performance in which she had never known the script. She had uncovered the truth about Daniel, or more precisely, about Thomas, the man she had buried 6 months ago. But that truth did not bring her peace. It left behind only emptiness, a pain that could not be erased. She could not return to her old life. She could not continue living in the shadow that man had created for her. Sarah could not go back to that house, could not go back to those old photographs, those memories now tainted by betrayal. But she also could not remain trapped in her pain forever. So she made a decision not to go back, not to return in search of forgiveness, not to beg for a love she once gave so completely. She refused to become a weak woman sitting in regret, waiting for something she could never control. She drove to a small park, a place where no one would watch her, no one would judge her, a place where there was only her in the silence. She stepped into the park, her hands still gripping the steering wheel moments before, feeling as if everything around her was sinking into darkness. The gentle wind did nothing to ease the pain inside her. Instead, it felt like it was pulling her deeper into a storm with no escape. She stood by a stone bench, letting out a long breath, trying to find a sense of peace within herself. She no longer knew what she was searching for. Was it release? Was it forgiveness? Or simply something to ease the weight in her chest? She had no answer, but she knew she could not keep living in lies. She needed to start again, to rebuild her life from the beginning. People always said time would heal everything, but Sarah was no longer sure that was true. Time could not change the truth. Time could not erase the lies Thomas had built. She had lived in those lies for far too long, and now that everything had shattered, all that remained was emptiness. But at least there was one thing that could not be taken from her: the freedom to choose her own path. She took out her phone, not to check messages or call anyone, but to open the photos of Thomas she had kept for so many years. She looked at those moments, unsure of what she should feel. She looked at him in those photos, the man she had trusted more than anyone in the world, the man she had loved enough to give up everything for. But now, all that remained were faded images, no longer a meaningful part of her life. She realized that what she needed was not answers from those who had deceived her. She did not need validation from Daniel, from Claudia, or from anyone else. She needed to create her own answers. She needed to choose her life again, starting from herself, free from any ties to the past. Everything she once believed was permanent, the memories, the promises, the moments of love, had been replaced by betrayal, and now all she had left was herself to save. Sarah stood up, more determined than ever. She did not need to prove anything to anyone. She did not need to prove she was right. What mattered was that she had to live for herself, to learn how to love herself again after everything that had happened. She returned to her car, but this time there was no exhaustion in her eyes, no despair in her steps. She had made her decision. No matter how difficult the road ahead might be, she would not allow herself to be pushed out of her own life again. She would not let these lies define her future. She would start over, rebuild everything from within herself. Sarah began to drive again, but this time she was not running away. She was no longer escaping the truth, no longer escaping the past. She simply moved forward, with no destination, no plan, just moving ahead. And for the first time in many months, she felt that she could breathe freely. The truth about Thomas, about Daniel, about everything she had lost, no longer hurt the way it once did. She did not know where she was going, but she knew one thing for certain: her life would no longer be built on lies. She would live truthfully as herself, and that was all she needed to do. She felt lighter than ever before, as if she had been set free, even without knowing what lay ahead. But Sarah knew that no matter what she might face, she would never return to the old path. She would live as her true self, and nothing could ever change that. Sarah could not remember how long she had been driving, but the roads she passed felt endless. The world around her seemed blurred. Every house she drove by felt like an invisible weight, reminding her of everything she had lost, everything she could never return to. The world no longer felt the same. The photos, the words, the memories, all of it had become fragments of a past that was already dead. She had found the truth, yet that truth did not set her free. It only made everything more uncertain, as if she had stepped into a search with no end. She did not return to Lucas's house, not because she did not love her son, but because she could no longer live in a world of lies. She could not face him when she could not even face herself. She could not accept that the man she once loved, the man who had shared so many years of her life, had deceived her so cruelly. Lucas did not know everything, and perhaps he never would understand the depth of the pain she was carrying. She felt as if she had lost everything, not only Thomas, but also everything she had once believed in within her family. Sarah stopped the car at an empty park. She stepped outside, not knowing what she was searching for, perhaps peace or simply a moment to breathe. She no longer expected forgiveness or understanding from anyone. She only wanted to face the truth on her own, no matter how painful it might be. The cold wind brushed across her face, making her feel more awake. Every drop of rain seemed to remind her that no matter what, time would continue to move forward. and she could never go back. She looked around the park, a place where she and Thomas used to walk together in the afternoons. Everything was still the same, yet now it existed only in her memories. She wondered if everything she had been through still held any meaning. She wondered if she could ever find herself again after everything that had happened. She did not know the answer, but at least she knew she had to keep moving forward, even without any sense of safety or certainty. She took out her phone and looked through the old photos of Thomas. Those beautiful moments they shared were now nothing more than faded images in her heart. She had once believed in that love, believed in a future they would build together, but now it was all nothing but deception. She could not continue living in the shadow of the past. She had to create a new future, no matter how difficult it might be. Suddenly, her phone vibrated. It was Lucas. She did not know what to do, but in the end she answered. Lucas's voice came through, filled with concern. "Mom, I know you are hurting, but you cannot keep doing this. You cannot keep living in this sadness." Sarah did not respond right away. She heard her son sigh. She could feel the pain in his voice, but she could not say anything. What she had endured was too much to simply accept. Life, no matter how painful, would continue, and she had to keep living, even if she did not yet know how. "You do not understand, Lucas," Sarah said, her voice hoarse with emotion. "You cannot understand this pain. You cannot understand this betrayal. I lived a perfect life with a man I trusted, and now everything has shattered." Lucas fell silent, saying nothing more. She could sense the helplessness in his voice. "Mom, I just want you to be happy. You have to be strong. You know that," he finally said softly. She let out a long breath. "You can help me by not asking about the things I cannot change. I have to start over, Lucas. I have to find myself again, no matter how long it takes." She ended the call, not wanting to hear any more comfort. Not because she did not love her son, but because she felt that from now on, this life was hers alone, and the decisions she made had to come from within. No one could live her life for her, and she could not allow this pain to control her forever. She decided she would not live in regret. She had to choose again, no matter what. She returned to her car and drove home. This time, she was no longer a woman of the past. She was Sarah, a strong woman who had endured everything. She was no longer afraid, no longer doubtful. She knew she would keep living, no matter how the world around her changed. She had chosen a new path, a path without lies, without betrayal, and that was the freedom she had been searching for. When she stepped into the house, the space around her seemed to welcome her, like a new beginning. The photos on the wall no longer haunted her. She knew she had finally freed herself from the darkness of the past. The future, no matter how many challenges it held, was hers. She would move forward and never look back. And for the first time in many months, Sarah felt truly alive. Thank you for following this deeply emotional story. Sarah has overcome pain and betrayal to rediscover her strength and freedom. Life is never easy, but we are the ones who choose the path we take. Even when we must face painful truths, remember that only the truth can set us free and help us move forward. If this story touched your heart, do not hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments below this video. Leave a comment, like, and share to spread a powerful message about never giving up, no matter how difficult life may be. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel so you can watch more inspiring stories. Together, we can build a strong community, ready to face every challenge in life. Let us move forward together on a new path with faith and hope.